A little while ago, I made a video as part of the One Marvelous Scene project, where we basically analysed one scene in the MCU and said what made it great. One of the creators in that project set the same challenge, but for DC. In my previous video, I talked about the terrible choice and sacrifice that Bruce Banner made in Thor Ragnarok to save his friends. So I figured I'd do the same thing for DC. Except this time, it's Clark's choice. Choices are always a good thing in writing. The more difficult choices you force your character to make, the more depth you give that character. It's a very simple and basic rule which will always improve your character writing. Choices are good. Superman has a fairly checkered history with decision making. We tend to think of him as a character who makes perfect moral decisions because in comics and pop culture, they paint him as a perfect Boy Scout. The movies are a little different. In the movies, he makes terrible choices. Like the time he roofied Lois with his kissing powers and erased her memories. Or the time he doomed a small town to drown to death because he wanted to save Lois. Or the time he used his superpowers to become a bully for the day. Or the time he committed murder. Actually, I'm gonna give him that one. Because I think that this is a rare piece of good character writing hidden within a fairly shallow universe. It's a choice that Clark is given, one with a heavy cost, and one that has to be made. But since we're on the topic of Man of Steel, I want to focus on another choice. When he's still very young and finding his identity, Clark saves a bus full of drowning kids. And good old Johnny Kent does what any responsible parent teaching his child right from wrong does, and scolds Clark for risking revealing that he's a superhuman. He makes Clark promise not to do anything which will reveal this secret. He essentially tells Clark to let innocent kids die to preserve the secret. This point is important. A short time later, Johnny is stuck in the path of a tornado from which he will not escape, and Clark is given the first major character-defining choice in his life. He can use his strength and speed to save his dad and reveal that he's a superhuman and break his promise to his dad. Or he can stay right where he is and let his dad die to preserve the secret. He chooses the latter. Here's the thing. While I disagree with how the scene is executed, I agree wholeheartedly with the event of the scene. This scene is the scene which is the basis for Clark beating Zod later. While Clark has two terrible choices in the scene versus Zod, one is selfish, sparing Zod so he doesn't need to bear the burden of murder, and one is selfless, accepting that burden to save the family. It's an excellent moment in which Clark shows his strength of character and makes a selfless choice, which could very possibly become a burden too great for him to bear. So, I don't want to weaken this scene in any way. If I change the Kent-Nado scene and make him survive, then I also weaken the ultimate decision scene, since the only reason that Clark is able to decide to kill Zod is because he's already been taught about sacrifice for the greater good via the death of his dad. Had he saved Jonathon and also kept his secret, he would never have learned that sometimes we have to sacrifice and carry a heavy burden in order to make the world generally better. This is what makes it a decent scene. Now I'm about to make it much better. The problem isn't the choice given to Clark. This is actually a great writing choice. The problem is the type of choice that he's given. Remember when I highlighted that later he is given a choice between a selfless choice and a selfish choice? Well, the choices in this scene in its current form are both selfish. Save his dad and preserve the secret and promise. Clark benefits from both. So while they're both bad choices, neither improves him as a character. They both make him worse. But like I said before, Johnny has to die, and Clark has to be the one who chooses it to preserve what is a pretty decent character development at the end. Here's what I would do. In order for Clark to become Superman, he has to learn to make decisions that benefit others even when there is a high cost to himself. This is the Superman that we all know. The movies so far have never nailed this. The reason I never bought the choice is that Clark has super speed and could easily have saved Jonathon and not even been seen, especially given the weather conditions and chaos, so him staying put doesn't make sense. He needs a reason to not save his dad. If I rewrote this scene, I would write it so that Clark is given a slightly different choice. And much like the often forgotten and misinterpreted scene in Richard Donner's Superman, it would be a binary choice, in which he has to accept that one of the choices will result in a loss. Unlike Donner's Superman, he would make the choice which will benefit others rather than himself. This brings it back to being a selfish versus selfless choice, the best kind of choice for character development. For added weight, I'd also write it so that Clark has to save a bus full of kids or his dad. So he would be faced with the exact choice that his dad told him he should never make, the choice that he promised his dad he would refuse. He would have to go against everything his dad told him to save the kids, and in the process accept and learn that him, his dad, and his secret is worth far less than the good he can do in the world as Superman.